Good morning and good day to you. You are tuned into the Feather of Light podcast. My name is Brandon Tilt and I'm your host. And today I'd like to jump into the topic of using art as therapy, but also more specifically using art as therapy as a means of integrating ayahuasca. And I suppose any other plant medicine. But for the purpose of this discussion, I'd like to really just explore what I've noticed holding art workshops in Ecuador for a variety of people that had just done ayahuasca the day before for the first time. And also seeing as though I'm in the process of preparing workshops or group sort of spaces that will be integration spaces. But I'm starting to see this overlap between the art workshops I want to do and the integration space. So there's a very good likelihood I'll be applying art therapy tools with the help of my friend who's an art therapist, and then allowing those integration spaces to apply some art therapy tools as kind of like a drop-in exercise at the beginning to kind of get things rolling, or maybe after some sharing, that'll be the way we kind of, have it as like the main event. I don't know. So stay posted for those. I'm really excited to get those rolling. Probably going to start off online. Definitely interested in having a couple of those in person, but I feel like a lot of the people I met in Ecuador that I want to bring into the space probably will, well, they don't live in Canada. They're not going to really be able to attend the in-person, but having this online space for people to come and share and integrate some of what happened about a year ago now. And maybe they've drank ayahuasca since, maybe they have not, maybe they took some of what they experienced in Ecuador and really rolled with it. Maybe they kind of just had to move on with their lives and never really had the space to integrate. And I would say that happens to, I want to say a lot of people. I don't know the statistics of it, but I would say there's a good chunk of people that they drink ayahuasca and they just don't have the capacity or the space or the I suppose the lifestyle to really integrate what came up in those ceremonies. Like maybe they've never been to counseling, maybe their life is just too stressful and there's not time. They don't have the time to really like unpack that stuff, or they haven't really explored something creative, and taking that leap feels too overwhelming for them. So I feel like this will be able to meet different people in different stages of their integration or different levels of readiness to integrate the medicine. Hopefully just bring people into a space where they can witness each other and see each other and drop in and have the opportunity to try some art therapy tools. So I don't remember exactly what it was like, what went through my mind as I was painting when I was in Iquitos, because I finished my retreat. And I spent about a week at this Airbnb that was still in the jungle. It was like still in the same landscape as the ayahuasca retreat, but it was the next house over. It was the next property over, which was actually pretty far away still. But I was there hanging out and I had a chance to paint. And I remember what I painted was very specific, or let's just say it was very unique. I never painted anything like this before, and felt to me like I was trying, like there was a couple ways to which I was just trying to depict something that I experienced that night, which I didn't quite see visually. That's the thing. At least from my experience, the plant spirits didn't really like have these like crazy 3D representations. At least 90% of the time you wouldn't see anything. It would just be more of like a sensing or a feeling, or this way to which it would influence your thinking and your emotional state. And there was a different form of consciousness there, but you couldn't sit there and point them out and watch them move around like you would a person or a hummingbird. But seriously, just to bring us back to the topic a bit, integration. It's kind of like you're trying to just take the wisdom of what you felt and what you experienced and what might have shifted in your belief systems while you were at the retreat, while you were in the ceremonies, maybe in the time that followed. But it feels really hard to kind of roll with it and apply it. So, I mean, if you don't have access to coaching or therapy, it can feel really challenging to return to some of those spaces that might have been really emotionally overwhelming, might have been really intense, either in a good way or a bad way, either in like a really intensely light and vibrant and you're flowing through a lot kind of way, or maybe it was just like heavy and dark and there was a lot you were being shown and a lot of truths that were surfacing that were heavy. And yeah, that can be intense in a different way. So it's like creating safety within the body, I would say is one of the most important things. Is like, what are you doing to really create that safe container to integrate? I would almost say that some of these memories won't surface, if you kind of follow how parts operate, at least, they won't surface until they feel like they're really safe. Like these memories and these emotions, they can be akin to parts. Exiles, usually, they're finally speaking some kind of truth, or they're finally showing you some kind of experience that you've bottled up for a long time and haven't felt fully. And you need to be able to create the safety for that experience to, I guess, be refelt, whether that's in the nervous system, whether that's the environment you're in and the people that are in your life, whether it's having somebody as a facilitator, or kind of like a support worker, like a counselor or coach or something like that. But it could be a breathwork facilitator, could be maybe even a yoga space where you have a safe instructor that creates a trauma-informed approach and really has done a lot to create that container for you. So just saying that whatever you do to integrate, it could be, body work, it could be art, any form of expression really, or it could just be talking about things that you've bottled up for a long time. You're going to want that safety in the body first and foremost. And whether that's something you create yourself or whether that's something you create for another person, I would say not having that safety, maybe not having the time first and foremost, but also not having that additional safety when you do have the time. I think that's one of the things that prolongs the integration process. That's just my personal take. People that put off even just talking about what happened in those ceremonies for, gosh, I don't know, could be years, if they don't feel like they really have anyone to talk with in their life, or they really know if there's any relevancy to what they experienced and there's no one that can validate that experience. I remember when we were at the retreat, they talked a lot about how not everybody's going to get this stuff. Not everybody's on the spiritual path or have even done any plant medicines, let alone ayahuasca. Not everyone understands what it's like to travel to a foreign country and have that, place your trust into a shaman that you've never met and drink this type of psychedelic brew that alters your state of consciousness. And some can say it goes much deeper than that in terms of it introduces a sort of openness to the cellular network. It introduces lots of sensations, and it's really flowing through the body in an attempt to clean the body, clean the spirit, sort of reprogram the cells, give the mind a fresh start in a lot of different ways, and then all the surrounding emotions and interactions, and the songs from the shamans and the firekeepers. And it's like, explaining this kind of stuff, let alone what you went through as a result, to someone that's never experienced any of that, it kind of does just sort of fall flat. And even if people have done, say, lots of mushrooms or lots of acid or whatever, they've done psychedelics before, it seems like unless they've really been to this very specific type of experience in South America, it can be really challenging to find someone who truly relates to it or understands, or maybe isn't. And this is just my assumption because I was this person, but maybe they're not just able to fully receive you because they're so curious. Like, it's such an interesting topic. They're just like, ooh, ayahuasca, it's the buzzword, right? Oh, okay. What? Tell me where you were. Tell me about the, what did you see? And maybe it's not like integration for you. It's not exactly like a healing experience. It's just like sharing, which is a component of it. But let's just be real. Sometimes it is just kind of like for, I don't know, the entertainment value, I suppose. And maybe people are just trying to kind of get information from you about where to go for a retreat. And like, I'm more than happy to share those details as well. But at the same time, for sake of integration, you have to be aware of what you really need at the time And if it's just a friend who's just super curious about the topic and doesn't actually necessarily have the, let's just say, the skills or the openness to really create a container for you to share about the more vulnerable and more challenging stuff, then maybe that's not the space for you to integrate, and keep on searching, I suppose. So that's one of the sort of needs, I would say, is being fulfilled through creating this container. I mean, integration spaces are valuable for a lot of reasons, but I think this one more pertains to those who have been to the jungle or Ecuador, which is also close to the jungle, but where I went wasn't necessarily in the jungle, and have drank these medicines in the place that I did. And I think there was a large population of people that went to the same space, and I can kind of bring them together in a way and try to kind of create that lasting community that I think was really strong during those 2 weeks. But after those 2 weeks, it's kind of like, how do you keep that network going, in a sense? But yeah, to speak to my experience of running my workshop, I actually had that idea for a long time. I wanted to do that for well over a year before I even went to Ecuador or drank ayahuasca myself. I've been getting into the, not the role of an art therapist necessarily, because you have to have a credential to consider yourself a licensed art therapist, but let's just say I'm a therapist with training and certification, and I've been an artist for a long time, and I apply these tools in my own personal approach. So I've also gone through a kind of like an introductory level of training with Jungian art tools for the sake of applying them in therapy, or just art tools for introspection, let's just call them. So I have some experience and background in tools, and I'm not just going in super new, but I won't consider myself an art therapist going into this. This was more of me just like trying things out and feeling like there's this need for using art as a tool to integrate these experiences, that how else can you really do it? At least maybe not at the retreat. So I love this retreat because they offered everybody the chance to do workshops, and there was a lot of different types of workshops. There were yoga classes, there were breathwork ceremonies, let's just call them breathwork sessions, drum circles, cacao ceremonies, men or women circles. There was a lot of initiatives taken by the former guests who were now volunteers. So me, as a facilitator and a volunteer, I was like, well, I'm going to run, I ran a drum circle. I ran what are called Bija mantra workshops. So just getting people to attune with their voices, and of course the art workshops. So those are amazing. I found it was like, I tried to, in a way, bring people in with like a prompt and some, so, I kind of led them through a bit of a meditation at the beginning, but oftentimes people just needed the space where the tools were there. And it was kind of like, I'm giving them permission, like, hey, you're allowed to just paint, this is the dedicated space. There's a group of people here. Everybody's just hanging out and painting. And, I played a little bit of music, but not really all that much. Like, I played some prayer music, and other times I would just play like chimes, like sound healing in the background. But like, once people dropped in, they kind of just did their thing. And sometimes those lasted for like 4 hours. It was amazing to see how much people just really wanted to drop in. And many of them didn't really paint. And I could tell there's that insecurity about, oh, I have to be like an artist and I have to make something super fancy. And I was kind of like, well, if you haven't painted in a long time, I think it's a great time to just like play around with these tools and see what comes up for you. And it's not a contest in a way. And I really tried to offer witnessing without being like, I'm trying to judge their artistic ability. I would very much spend time kind of just on my own, averting my eyes. I didn't want to sit there and just watch them paint. I feel like that's very important as a facilitator. You're not making them uncomfortable in that way. So yeah, I just I did that a few times. I offered a couple one-on-one spaces for people to kind of just like talk with me as they're painting, and I would essentially just kind of give them that space and allow them to really decompress and make more of an intimate experience around it. And so then now, gosh, it's been a year now. I did that in November last year, so probably about 11 months. Now I'm returning to this idea, and we're breathing life back into it after, so long of just focusing more on my counseling, my coaching, and just working with clients one-on-one. Now I'm doing the group spaces. So art as a tool to integrate medicine. Why do I feel like this is such a a relevant topic for me. It just keeps on cycling back. Well, I think we're all aware that there's something about art's ability to bypass the thinking mind. And that's kind of what you do, I would say, quite successfully in an ayahuasca ceremony is if you go deep enough, let's just say, the mind finally relaxes or just gets kind of dismantled, or it realizes through trial and error that you're not buying the bullshit anymore. And then it just sort of like steps back, even just temporarily. And I would say that when you're painting, you're going into that similar headspace, right? You're telling the mind that, hey, we're gonna just take a step back and we're gonna allow the other side of the mind. But I would even say it's debatable that you can channel something outside of just the mind, and you're just experiencing the body a little bit more, or you're experiencing color and expression and flow states very differently than, say, just living in the mind and calculating what you do on the canvas. Like, I think there is a degree to which actually I'm quite confident when we're painting, we're shifting between, let's call it the left brain, right? The logical thinking mind, and the creative, kind of chaotic, openly expressive mind, which is the right brain. And, you're engaging in different faculties of the brain. That's one way to look at it. But I would say you can also look to parts in terms of the inner critic is coming in and telling you, this is how it ought to be. This is how I ought to understand life. This is how I ought to interpret the experience of the ceremony. This is how I ought to, in a sense, judge what plant medicine even really does for me. And you can kind of sit in that and you can experience that. And if you get stuck in that, oof, you're not going to really experience, I would say, the deeper medicine of being receptive. So there's something there to the receptiveness that you can engage with when you paint or when you get into a creative mindset. And there's like this openness, this curiosity that you are calling in. And then you can really experience what happened very differently. And I would say most of it happens unconsciously, at least it did for me. I would just start painting and having fun with it and playing and not thinking about anything. And then it's like this thing just kind of came up. This whole experience just like was laid out before me, and I can look at it and be like, I sort of knew there was something going on here when I was in the experience, but I wasn't able to really grasp it or put it into words or express it. There was probably just so much going on in my body and so much going on in the Maloka in terms of like noises, like the ikaros, the jungle sounds, even just kind of like the little background noises of other people. It was so hard to attune to these, let's just call them spirits, or let's just call them something that's cleaning your body, something that's like really moving, the energy that's moving in your body. So I feel like possibly, I'm just proposing that when you're in these art spaces and you're really trying to reignite this curiosity and this receptiveness, that you're actually reattuning to those let's just call it the movement of energy that you experienced while you were in those ceremonies that might have been actually, for me at least, it was very hard to focus and sit with and really allow some of these experiences to really be felt on a deeper level, because it was like they were fleeting. They'd be ping-ponging. I'd be ping-ponging actually between, oh my God, I'm so terrified, I don't know what's going on. Oh my God, my body hurts and this is so unpleasant. And then other times just being like, this is just wild. I can't believe this is where I am and this is what I'm doing. And there's a beauty to this. And just sort of sitting in the experience of the raw medicine, let's just call it, and the experience of the jungle and stuff like that. And so we're trying to re-experience something, when you're painting in an integration space for sake of, let's just say, integrating your plant medicine journey. It's like you're trying to reintroduce yourself to the experience that you had, maybe interpret it a little bit differently, maybe feel some of those same emotions, right? Bring in some of those same emotions, but in a container that you maybe just feel is more trustworthy or more reliable, or, maybe the person a little bit better, right? Like that's one of the challenges of being in these ceremonies is you don't really get to know the facilitators all that well. I think you start to trust them, to the best of your ability over the course of the ceremonies, but you don't really know them all that well. And there's not really an ability to establish a deeper level of rapport. And I would say with the integration circles, maybe your first few weeks of them, let's just say they're once a week, you're still kind of getting into the space of trusting the space and trusting the people, but it's kind of like you gradually build that rapport. And then maybe by the 10th integration circle offering, you're kind of like, all right, I now feel like my parts, let's just use that language, my parts, my protector parts, trust the space. They trust myself even. You start to trust yourself more deeply. And the expression is just kind of like the channel for the raw energy that was being experienced in those containers, but also didn't have the safety to be fully embodied. And that can also look like the movement that you didn't get to experience while you were in the circle. I just want to speak to that with the Shipibo. They really did not encourage you to do anything other than sit on your mat, lay down. If you got to get up, it's really just to go to the bathroom, and it's pitch black, so it's pretty challenging to do so. You wouldn't move from your mat for a lot of good reasons. And in Ecuador, you would be encouraged, but for other reasons, usually it was like a social anxiety. You didn't really feel comfortable to just free flow and do whatever you wanted. I mean, some nights, sure, but for the most part, I think it was more challenging to just be, because you were in a group of people all drinking this medicine. There was so much going on. It was like the opposite. One was there was so little going on, you didn't want to disturb the peace. The other was just like, oh my God, there's so much going on. I think I'm probably feeling safer just curled up in my blanket at my little bed here. So it's kind of like both of those things in a way maybe just made it harder for you to just be in your authentic experience. And I would say, you want to be able to move your body to continue this process of what surfaced when you were drinking the plant medicine, what the ayahuasca spirit grandmother sort of determined or pinpointed was like, okay, this is what you need to bring up and needs to be released. And maybe you did a lot of that while you were, puking or shitting or just maybe the work in between ceremonies was that for you. But I would say there's probably a deep rabbit hole, a real adventure that you could go down once you actually give yourself the space to fully embody whatever it is that was being pinpointed by the plant spirit. And that's where having a container where you can authentically express, whether it's in the integration space or just on your own, now that you've, let's just say, been reminded, right? It's been put fresh into your memory and your emotional experience that this is what happened and this is the work that you were doing and continue to do. And then now you can take that and do a personal journey of movement or a personal journey of whatever your expression is, whatever your outlet is. And you can kind of, take the initiative to go much deeper than you might in 1 hour of painting in an integration circle, right? Like, that's where I feel so much of integration is about motivating people to take the initiative to do the healing themselves. And I'd say there's a bit of an overlap there with parts work too, where once you really inspire somebody through engaging with their parts, through creating safety, through activating self-energy and creating safety for their parts, they can be like, whoa, I didn't know that was possible. And now through this experience of having dipped a toe in, it's like how much deeper that realm goes. And I would say the same goes for expression, same goes for integration, same goes for exploring sexuality, to be perfectly honest. It's something I'm just kind of bringing in as a curveball, but I think it's connected. And same goes for parts work and just, knowing that once you create safety for one part, it's almost like all the other parts are eager to experience the same thing. Or you can even just kind of start to gain the confidence that, oh, this is possible. Oh, I can start to communicate with this part that's starting to, act up and, create a bunch of, let's just call it dysregulation in the body, or it's starting to create a lot of disturbing thoughts. And it's kind of like you can communicate with that part. You can really find a way to have a collaborative experience with them versus them just kind of taking over. So really excited to get this container rolling. Maybe just to give you a taste of what the program I did was like. So it's called the Inner Schooling Program, and it was by the I think it's the Applied Jungian Institute, and it is a institute that exists in the UK, and they were offering these as live webinars that were about 3.5, maybe 4.5 hours long. And there was a group of about 100 students, many of which were actually like academic, like older academics that were like philosophers, teachers, all sorts of therapists and artists. And I was kind of like this little kid in a way compared to many of these people. They're probably like twice my age, and I was just there kind of like, am I over my head here? I don't know if I understand all the abstract philosophy connected to these art therapy exercises, but I'm going to give it a shot. And it was a really beautiful process of understanding how, let's just call it this network of Jungian philosophical concepts, such as alchemy, the alchemical wedding, what's called the rainbow bridge, which is a process of understanding the alchemical process of crossing the threshold, the experience of getting on this boat that takes you to the other world, understanding the difference between what they call the Apollinian consciousness and Dionysian consciousness, one which is more structured and orderly and very kind of, it's like the form of artistic expression that you see in like Greek statues. It's like this like, aha, look at these heroes, look at these titans. But then it's kind of like the contrast of that is the Dionysian, that's just crazy and chaotic and unhinged and essentially just partying and dancing in the night and staying up all night doing fire and moon ceremonies. And it's kind of like the orgiastic plethora of all these sensory experiences, and how both of those sides of expression are relevant in the process of healing. So it's kind of like you don't want to deny one aspect of your experience of expression. Let's just say you're overly Apollinian and you're like super straight edge when it comes to your expression. Or let's just say you're super, super unhinged and you're leaning so much into the disorderly and the wild and the primal, but you don't have the capacity to have that, let's just call it alignment with the higher forms of consciousness that exist within this process of art and expression. So anywho, this 12-month, once a month course gradually brought us deeper into understanding these tools, and some of which were, the first one, I think it was about understanding your higher consciousness and starting to paint and get familiar with this thing that they call the higher consciousness, which also seemed to be similar to like your inner child, but they just call it like this higher being. I would say it's similar to self-energy, but they kind of portrayed it differently. And all these exercises that utilize the unconscious mind and get you really thinking about like what art even really is, like combining in things in a synesthetic way, like trying to embody sound and taste through your paintings, through color, or trying to really lean into and allow a color to guide you versus being guided through, trying to create something. It's just allowing the color to guide you. So there's something here to doing basically shadow work through these tools and really allowing the unconscious to thrive through the process of art. And I would say that's the goal of art therapy is not just to create some sort of piece. If it's just about the end goal, you're probably not doing art therapy. There's something here about what you experience and how you're allowing the unconscious mind to really flow through and be received, and what you're potentially taking away from that, what you can kind of interpret from your piece is helpful too. I would say there's a secondary approach to the art therapy process where once you've created the tool, once you've utilized the tool and created the painting or the form of expression, now there's a secondary way to which you're interpreting it and understanding it and making sense of it. And that could be through writing, that could be through meditation, that can be through a form of movement in relation to the piece. Art therapy is awesome. Art therapy is like utilizing all the different tools that we have in our arsenal and kind of like weaving them together in a way that is just attempting to go as deep as possible into the unconscious realm without psychedelics or without, I would say, going so deep that you lose control. But I mean, I think there is, maybe that's just something I could speak to very briefly. There's a possibility that through art, you can actually go into some pretty unhinged, I've used that word a few times, but let's just say tumultuous states of being, maybe even unstable, one might say. So it's kind of like art allows you to go into these spaces, but like I would say it's important that you're also recognizing that if you're destabilizing your mental state and your body and your spirit, there'll be probably a integration period for doing the art therapy tool itself. And it's probably responsible. Like it's important that you're responsible and able to create safety for yourself after engaging in that process. So like, what does that look like? You know, maybe it's emotional support. Maybe after you've engaged in art therapy, you know that talking to somebody for sake of integrating that experience will help you and help, you know, you be received in what it is that you're going through or what you went through. Or maybe it's just going out into nature and allowing that to ground you. Maybe it is continuing it with a different form of expression, like movement. Maybe you spent a lot of time in that art therapy process just playing with color and playing with sound, and then now you need to move. Or maybe you are a musician and you're feeling now that the movement of energy through painting and dancing and talking about your plant medicine has evoked something in you that wants to be expressed through sound, through singing, through creating music, and just giving yourself that space to, I would say, responsibly continue this thing that you've started, like that you've sort of unlocked, not just allowing that to kind of go away in a sense. It's kind of like you're fanning a flame, but I would say it's there's probably a better metaphor. It's like if you don't keep moving, it's like that energy is going to try to find a way to express itself, and that might actually be in the form of, you know, pain. It's a bit of an assumption, but I do feel like that's how trauma operates, right? If you experience a trauma and you don't have the ability to say shake it out, it's going to find a way to, you know, bury itself in your body and get expressed in different ways. And I would say there's something here about once you unlock your deeper connection to this process of art therapy or creative expression, or doing the deep dives with your deities or your inner work, it's kind of like you have a responsibility to continue that work. And if you kind of just pretend that everything's all good, it's all gravy, you know, you don't really need to continue that work, I would say it can often will manifest in different distractions, like methods of distraction, maybe impulses. I would say firefighter parts are probably more likely to come out and create, let's just call it like bad habits, or, you know, impulsive thinking, or, you know, maybe destructive patterns or behaviors as the result of not integrating what has come up throughout those sessions. So yeah, I mean, I know I'm going back to the parts language because it's what I'm familiar with, but it does feel to me like you're essentially engaging with exiles when you do art therapy or plant medicine. In a certain way, you're creating this dialogue with a very vulnerable part of you. And when you choose to, in a sense, neglect that work or that part, now having kind of awakened it, well, the protector parts don't trust your leadership. They don't trust that you've initiated this dialogue with this part for a good reason, and they'll essentially apply mechanisms, or, you know, defense mechanisms or firefighter protector parts that are kind of just the ones that are, I'd say, connected to addiction. So there's going to be these behavioral responses that are going to distract you and numb you out and find ways to seek pleasure that are helping your whole system have a kind of equilibrium, help creating safety for that part that feels like it needs that safety. So it's kind of like once you engage into this work, you know, any kind of shadow work really, you have a type of responsibility to the wounded parts within you that want to see, I don't want to say it like this, but they want to see results. They want to see that you've actually listened to them, and there's a leader, there's someone in charge who actually can take initiative and make smarter or different decisions that are supporting them and creating more harmony for the system, and that the protector parts don't feel the need to just take back over. And, you know, it's not a bad thing if they do. I think protector parts are actually serving us in a lot of ways. It's not like we want to remove them. We're not going to be able to remove them from our system. But I think it's important that we're taking away some of the pressure from these protector parts so that they don't feel like they need to engage in more extreme reactions when we're, say, going into a ceremony, or say doing art therapy, or say entering into a vulnerable space. We're kind of in a way taking some of the pressure off of them so that when they come in, maybe it's more of a skillful approach, and maybe it's more of a supportive role versus like, all right, we need control right now. What are we going to do to get that control? Who are we going to have to cut off and set boundaries around to get that control? And, they can trust you to do that in a, let's just call it a more balanced way. So took a little bit of a tangent here, relating parts work to art therapy, and how I see there's this, like, you're entering into a process, and once you've started that process, you're continually integrating, and there's kind of like a consequence of basically ignoring that you're in a process. So maybe just to wrap this up in something practical, what process are you in right now? Right? As a listener, I'm curious, what process have you began to engage with? Right? Maybe it's some big life event has shifted things. Maybe you've done some deep work. Maybe you've engaged in therapy or coaching or something related to that for the first time in a long time. Maybe you've done a really big deep dive with a psychedelic, and you're currently integrating that. And just recognizing and giving yourself grace whilst in a process that can take time, and not disregarding the fact that there's going to be these shifts while you're in the process. Kind of think of I think a good example is all these like lunar or solar events. While in Mercury retrograde, you don't just completely overlook that there's a kind of collective shift going on. I think many people use that as a healthy reference point. Now, I think it's important to recognize within that collective shift, there's an individual experience of that cycle. So, what's your process in relation to the greater collective shift? And just recognizing, oh man, yeah, I just ended a relationship. Maybe I need some time to integrate that. Oh man, I just ended a friendship, and there's grief in that, or I'm grieving, or I don't know, like I just moved, or I just immigrated somewhere, or I'm learning this new thing that's really important to me, and it takes time, and there's a learning process involved. So it's just kind of like, what process are you in? Maybe it's about shadow work. Maybe it's about learning about parts work. Maybe it's about learning about your inner artist and developing a dialogue with them. Maybe it's about none of those things. It's just a different process that I haven't explained or expressed here. I'm not familiar with. But yeah, just recognizing that it's beautiful when we start something. It is. It's amazing. It's revitalizing. It's life affirming. It's exciting. It's exciting when we start something. But I feel like there's something here to recognizing the importance of following that thing through, following that thing and committing to that process to, what might be the end point that might not look like what you thought it was when what you thought it would be when you set out, right? So just recognizing that you're following this thing through to the end, whatever that is. Whether it's transformation, you've started to transform, well, you're continuing that process, see how that goes. You started doing parts work, well, might as well just see where this takes you. You started painting, well, let's just see how this process, if you can stick it out, let's just see what happens to you in 5 or 10 years and what that tool becomes for you, what that creative outlet becomes for you. So, inviting you to lean into the process and get excited. You're along for the ride now. And, if there's a hesitancy or resistance to continue that, yeah, maybe just checking in around where that could be coming from or how you can feel supported in that. So this has been an interesting discussion around art therapy, connecting it to my experience of integration for sake of, let's just say, ayahuasca or other plant medicines. Maybe just looking at how parts work in addition is this other sort of side-by-side process with the integration process. It can be a tool for that, or it can just be another avenue of expressing integration, experiencing integration. Just looking at the idea of we're in a process, right? And what process you in right now, and what stage you in that process, or are you at the start of the process or at the end of the process? And if you just ended one process, what are you starting now? Anyway, thanks for joining me today. And yeah, I appreciate if you leave maybe a 5-star review if you like this podcast, if you learned something. In addition to that, just remind you guys that I do have space for at least one counseling client if you're interested in working with me one-on-one. Additionally, I still am running my parts workshops, so you can join me on Fridays or Saturdays. I believe I'll be creating space next Friday at 9:30 a.m. PST. Come learn about parts work. Come see how your parts are behaving, or maybe if there's a need for accountability there, and I'd love to have you there. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thanks for joining me. Take care for now. Bye.